So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Kruti Vyas, and today I'm going to present Reinforcing Victorian Marriage Norms in Hardy's Jude the Obscure. Here is my academic details with presentation details. This is a table of content which I will discuss today. So, my research question is, how does Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure depict the tension between individual desires and Victorian societal expectation of marriage? And in what ways does the novel reinforce the prevailing marriage norms of this era? Hypothesis: in Jude the Obscure, Hardy portrays the tragic consequences of challenging Victorian marriage conventions, suggesting that individual desires are often suppressed by societal norms, thereby reinforcing the authority and rigidity of the Victorian marriage institution. Victorian marriage, a sordid legal and moral contract. Marriage as a mercenary institution. So, in Victorian society, marriage operated as a legal and economic transactions and property, inheritance, and respectability over affection or companionship. Here, Hardy exposed this hypocrisy in this Jude the Obscure, and he describing marriage as a sordid contract, legal entrapment through the Matrimonial Causes Act 1857. The Matrimonial Causes Act 1857 made divorce a civil matter but kept it financially prohibitive and morally especially for women. So here Hardy mirrors this rigidity through Jude's the forced marriage to Arabella, and it's symbolizing society power to override individual freedom. Religion and morality as a reinforcing agent. So the church upheld marriage as a sacred duty, linking moral virtue to marital obedience. So here Hardy critics said, yeah, this moral showing how religion and law together sustain patriarchal control and silence personal desires. The societal must, ideological conditioning. So the angel in the house idol. So Victorian women were conditioning to embody the angel in the house, pure, submissive, and devoted to domestic duty. But here Hardy subvert this idea through Arabella, who fulfill social norms outwardly but lacks emotional depth or spiritual connection. Second one, Hardy's critique of moral conformity. So he reveals that the societal must, the expectation to conform, suppress individuality and happiness. By portraying this character who challenge these norms, Hardy here exposes the psychological cost of conformity. Marriage as the measure of respectability. So Hardy here exposes how this ideological pressure forces conformity, especially among the working class, where marriage ensured economic survival and social approval. Jude's first failure, Arabella and obligation. So Jude's intellectual dream crushed by domestic obligation. And as we know that Victorian society pressure men and women to conform and punishing deviation. And here marriage depict as a trap for emotional and intellectual freedom. So here Hardy critiques the tension between individual aspiration and societal duty. Sue Bridehead, the spirit of comradeship. Sue is Jude's intellectual and emotional equal, sharing his ideas and aspiration. And her choice highlights the conflict between personal desires as well as Victorian societal norms. And here, Hardy embodies the new woman and seeking autonomy, equality, and personal freedom. Central conflict between contrast versus comradeship. So here Jude and Sue reject formal marriage and seeking a partnership based on equality. So here central tension in this novel, love and personal desire versus law and societal expectation. So the couple struggle highlights here how societal enforcement suppresses emotional freedom, challenging the norm, social backlash. So here marriage act as a moral and social weapon and enforcing conformity and suppressing rebellion. So the Hardy portrays here social pressure as a force that crushes personal desires. social ostracism and as a repression. So in Jude the Obscure, Jude and Sue are forced into exile as a result of social condemnation, reflecting the harsh consequences of defined Victorian norms. And here society actively silence alternative models of love and companionship. So here showing how collisions between individual desires and societal enforcement lead to inevitable tragedy. So the tragic climax, little father time, done because we are too many. Here, this quotation highlights the internalized social guilt. So in Jude the Obscure, the children's murder, suicide represents society moral judgment on those who defy conventional marriage and social norm. So this tragedy underscores the fatal consequences of rejecting Victorian expectation, and also here Hardy critiques that a system that prioritizes conformity over personal happiness, and it also exposing the oppressive rigidity of Victorian moral as well as legal codes. So mechanism of reinforcement. So here Hardy demonstrate a cyclical mechanism in which rebellion leads to tragedy, which in turn reinforce societal norms. So here Hardy also critiques the oppressive nature of Victorian institution. The narrative outcomes ultimately uphold the very norms, and he also criticized showing that deviation from social rules carries severe and often fatal consequences. This mechanism highlights the tragic power of societal structure to suppress individuality and enforce conformity. The final capitulation, Sue's return. Sue remarries Philorson under the weight of guilt, and the new woman is defeated by societal and moral pressure. So here Hardy shows how even independent as well as intellectual women can't escape Victorian expectation and reinforce the dominance of rigid social and marital norms. So tragic consolidation. So here Jude's death served to complete the process of social correction, illustrating how society eliminates those who challenge its norm. So here the conclusion underscores the paradox of Hardy's work, exposing flaws in social structure while depicting their unyielding power. So here conclusion and a hypothesis proved that Hardy's Jude the Obscure shows that how Victorian marriage norms suppress personal desire and comradeship. So here Jude and Sue's rebellion leads to ostracism, exile and tragedy, while symbolic events like Little Father's time's death and Sue's capitulation reinforce societal rules. Though Hardy here critiques oppression as well as the novel, this novel paradoxically restores social orders. And my hypothesis is proven because every time they choose their own desire, they get hit within insane amount of tragic punishment. They lose their social standing and they are treating like criminals, and their children die, and here Sue completely break down. So therefore the tragic outcome actually reinforces the rigid marriage norms, just like my hypothesis says. So this is my learning outcomes. I have learned to clearly identify and articulate the intense tension in the novel between the characters' individual desires and the rigid expectation of Victorian marriage laws. So this is the key points throughout my presentation, which you help to. These are my references. So thank you. Questions are welcome, please.
My question is, can Hardy critique of marriage in Jude Obscure be read as a rebellion against both Christian morality and capitalist social order?
Yes. So in the Jude the Obscure, Hardy portrays marriage as a prison of both faith and social ambition. So rebelling against Christian morality and the capitalist order by showing how love is defined by rigid rules and material concern. Thank you so much, everyone.